Part 1, Let Go. You've been up there on that diving board, making sure it's nice and straight. You've made sure it's not too slick. You've made sure it can stand the weight. You've made sure that the spring is tight. You've made sure that the cloth won't slip. You've made sure that it bounces right and that your toes can get a grip. And you've been up there since 5:30, doing everything but dive. So some of you might recognize that poem and who wrote it. Others of you might be thinking, Mary Oliver? Wendell Berry? Rumi? Actually, this is the verse that introduced me to the wacky world of Shel Silverstein about 15 years ago, at 40 years of age. I was really late to the party. At the time, I was a relatively new coach, and this poem hit all the right notes of things I was talking with clients about: perfectionism, risk-taking, fear, action. And opening with this verse about, kind of at its core, perfectionism, is the perfect way to open this talk about letting go and traveling light. These are two concepts that we are familiar with, many of us, in a sort of self-help and personal growth context. They're also useful in considering our spiritual journey when we're exploring what it means to make the most of our life on this planet. Because when we let go of needing to know the answers, we can embrace and enjoy the mysteries that life presents us every day. And when we choose to travel light, we lose the weight added by the physical and mental junk that we gather along the way. In both cases, we create more space for our inner world to breathe. We're more grounded, and we have more space to connect to love, spirit, others, and ourselves. For me, part of letting go and making space has been trusting where my instincts take me. That's the whole being the Bethiest Beth thing. 15 years ago, my instincts told me when I read this particular poem to dig into Silverstein's writing. I created an outline for a presentation based on selected poems from Where the Sidewalk Ends, Light in the Attic, and Falling Up. And I never had a formal opportunity to put that together until today. Yay! So thank you. While the books were written primarily for children, they have plenty of hints for adults about how to be a good person and living a good life. He dances around ideas that encourage openness and vulnerability, both of which are basic requirements for any sort of soul searching. I'm inclined towards a quasi-spiritual reading of these poems because they speak to my desire to connect to an energy deep within myself and far beyond myself. In thinking about what makes these verses so powerful, I remember another favorite poet, Emily Dickinson, who opened one poem with, "Tell all the truth and tell it slant," but tell it slant. And she closed that same poem by writing, "The truth must dazzle gradually, or every man be blind." Focusing only on a few dozen of the hundreds of poems across those three books, I found Silverstein telling all the truth about compassion, trust, fear, regret, truth, intuition, action, passivity, but telling it slant. In a way, they're all quirky parables, almost echoing those used in various world religions to communicate moral truths, but in a user-friendly format. And just like the parables of Jesus and other prophets that we might be familiar with from the Bible, many of Silverstein's stories are pointed, provocative, and subversive. Where the Sidewalk Ends was banned by various libraries and schools in 1986, 12 years after it was published in 1974. And 1981's A Light in the Attic was the target of further attempts at banning, in part because of one verse that apparently encouraged children to be messy and disobedient. As if kids need that kind of encouragement. So I hope I've set the table enough that you're ready to come along with me on an extremely abbreviated version and journey through 8 of Silverstein's carefully curated poems that invite us to let go and travel light. I'll share a poem, I'll offer a few thoughts, and then I'll leave that poem with a question for your consideration. So I started with the poem, The Diving Board, and I want us to hear it again now that we know a little bit more about where we're going. You've been up there on that diving board, making sure it's nice and straight. You've made sure that it's not too slick. You've made sure you can stand the weight. You've made sure that the spring is tight. You've made sure that the cloth won't slip. You've made sure that it bounces right and that your toes can get a grip. And you've been up there since 5:30, doing everything but dive. I hear so many things in this very simple poem. What does it tell us about letting go? It seems to be telling us to let go of the need for ideal conditions before we do something. It echoes sometimes our conditional decision-making. If this happens or it's true, then and only then can I take action. If the sun comes out, then I'll go for a run. If we get new dishes, then we can invite our friends over to dinner. Those are a couple of everyday if-thens. But we all know that there are more pervasive and devastating conditionals that I bet every single one of us has said at least once in our lives. If I get a new job, if I get a new partner, a new car, a new house, a new town, then I'll be happy. And anyone who self-identifies as a perfectionist, you likely hear this message loud and clear. If everything is perfect, then I can take a risk. This doesn't mean that we dive when we know that there's a screw loose that could send us to our deaths. But most often, whatever it is that's keeping us up there and not diving is not about life and death. We cling to our need for absolute physical and psychological safety and let it stop us from taking action. Because after all, we don't want to get hurt or embarrass ourselves. Or, this is one I've experienced, and I know I'm not alone in this. We don't want to shatter our ego, how we think about ourselves. If there's something risky that I want to do, in my imagination, I can do it, whatever it is. I can do it well. I can even be fabulous at it. But if I do the thing, then I'll find out if I can do it. And what if I can't? What if I fail? Better not to do the thing and be content with my imagined greatness than to do it and find out I'm not so great. What if I find out I'm not really who I thought I was? Question. Consider something that you want to do, say, release, or embrace. What are you waiting for? Next up, we have Ma and God. Ma gave us fingers. Ma says, use your fork. God gave us voices. Ma says, don't scream. Ma says, eat broccoli, cereal, and carrots. But God gave us tasties for maple ice cream. God gave us fingers. Ma says, use your hanky. God gave God gave us puddles. Ma says, don't splash. Ma says, be quiet, your father is sleeping. But God gave us garbage can lids to crash. God gave us fingers. Ma says, put your gloves on. Ma gave us raindrops. God gave us raindrops. Ma says, don't get wet. Ma says, be careful and don't get too near to those strange, lovely dogs that God gave us to pet. God gave us fingers. Ma said, go wash them. But God gave us coal bins and nice dirty bodies. And I ain't too smart, but there's one thing for certain. Either Ma's wrong or God is. So in this poem, I hear a message. We probably all hear something different. So as I'm sharing what I hear, it's like through my own filter and my life experiences. And so it's maybe telling you something about me, but I hear a message about treating certain things as too precious and not being able to let go of control. And when I think about it, there are certainly times when I treat myself or an object as too precious. When confronted with a challenge to my comfort, my thoughts can go to, oh my gosh, if I do that, I'll get dirty, I'll sweat, I'll get wet, My muscles will ache. If I use it, I might scratch it or I might dent it. I might use it all up. And what if they stop making it? I can tell some of you have said that to yourself. And that list could go on and on. Maybe we're listening too much to Ma and not enough to God. And when I say God, I'm mostly reflecting the poem's language. Please swap it out for whatever you call this force or energy that is bigger than yourself. The problem that doesn't sound like a problem is that listening to Ma feels safe, like we're adding some level of comfort and security to our lives. Listening to God, though, is releasing control, because despite the thou shall and thou shall nots we all grew up with, we still have free will. That means we can decide to throw caution to the wind and eat that maple ice cream, splash in the puddles, and get our hands dirty. God gave us the impulse to do those things and also gave us Lactaid, towels, and soap and water. There's a time and place to be careful. And when we decide to be careful every time and in every place, it's often not necessary. I had a personal experience with this on Friday night. Andy, my husband, Andy's cousin Karen, and I set out at 11 p.m. in search of bioluminescent mushrooms in the woods around our cabin up north. We carried only a red lantern, light lantern, so that our eyes can more quickly adjust to the darkness. Now, these are woods that Andy and Karen grew up in. They ran around barefoot in the dark. They knew inside and out. Now, for me, there were lots of reasons not to go. The night was really humid. The mosquitoes were very hungry. And I had to get up a little bit earlier than usual on Saturday morning. But we covered ourselves in bug spray and headed out. At one point, we got disoriented. We weren't sure when it happened, but we had wandered off the main road and onto an older road that sort of forked off. For a minute or two, we thought we had gotten lost in these woods that they knew so well. We were feeling sticky from the humidity, and we weren't seeing the mushrooms. We thought the adventure was a bust. Just when we were giving up, though, I started seeing small spots of light off the road, all in the brush. We waited in the dark, made sure no lights, and we saw a few more. And in the end, we saw the lights, but not necessarily the mushrooms themselves. They were very small, they were sort of off the road a little bit too much, and they were often kind of covered by some leaves, and we didn't want to touch them. When we were satisfied that we'd at least found a few and saw the bioluminescence, we headed back to the cabin, grateful that we'd made the effort. Now, for me, it would have been easy to listen to Ma. It's too late. There's skunks out there. You'll get eaten alive. You could trip and fall. You'll have to take another shower. We choose to let go of all those reasons not to go and instead listen to God. God gave us eyes that adjust to darkness, ears to hear the critters, citronella to ward off the bugs, and water to wash off the ick. Question: what do you miss out on because you get too precious about it? To close out part one, a pair of poems about traffic lights. The traffic lights simply would not turn green, so the people stopped to wait as the traffic rolled and the wind blew cold and the hour grew dark and late. Zoom varoom, trucks, trailers, bikes, and limousines clattering by, me, oh my, won't that light turn green? But the days turned weeks and the weeks turned months, and there on the corner they stood, twiddling their thumbs till the changin' comes, the way good people should. And if you walk by that corner now, you might think it's strange to see them there where they hopefully gaze with the very same smile on their very same face as they patiently stand in the very same place and wait for the light to change. Friday morning, I was driving into Traverse City off of Old Mission Peninsula, and there was some construction happening at the base of the peninsula that meant there was only one lane of traffic that could go at a time, controlled by somebody with a flag. Despite the fact that there was no oncoming traffic in any direction that could keep one from turning left at the light and out of gridlock, I watched several vehicles sit at the red light, and then once it turned green, they tried to turn left, but they couldn't because of oncoming traffic. So when I was close enough and the coast was clear, I turned left right through that red light. So there are times when following the herd keeps us safe, and there are times when it's kind of just plain silly. Things don't always work the way they're supposed to. Those moments call on us to let go of wishing the situation or the life we have is ideal. They give us an opportunity to stop waiting for that proverbial light to change and instead be the light change and make the light change. All we have to do is use our common sense and let go of common nonsense. Consider this verse that's in a different volume of poems, but it kind of feels like a part 2. When the light is green, you go. When the light is red, you stop. But what do you do when the light turns blue with orange and lavender spots? Unexpected problems, such as a lane being closed or a light not turning green, often have unusual solutions. They ask us to question our assumptions about the way things are supposed to be. Question: do you recognize opportunities, especially when they don't look like you expect them to? Do you dismiss them when they're uncomfortable or even mysterious? Part 2, travel light. Somebody has to go polish the stars. They're looking a little bit dull. Somebody has to go polish the stars, for the eagles and starlings and gulls have all been complaining they're tarnished and worn. They say they want new ones we cannot afford. So please get your rags and your polishing jars. Somebody has to polish the stars. This is such a beautiful way of reminding us to value what we already have. Everywhere we're told to consume, consume, consume. It's easy to get bored and stop seeing the abundance that we have when we're constantly bombarded with bright, shiny objects. I mean, heaven forbid you have an iPhone 14 or a car without AirPlay. How can you stand it? Upgrade now and save money by spending money that you never intended to spend in the first place. So it's no wonder that we're drowning in stuff. And I mean, it's kind of good for C3 that we're drowning in stuff since we have the Clear the Clutter. This is a little commercial event for this coming Saturday. It's really a perfect opportunity to let go and travel light. So question, what stars do you have that could be saved with a little polish? Don't just think of objects or possessions. Think of relationships that maybe have lost their sparkle, or dormant hobbies that once brought you joy. What would be more meaningful, to replace them or to revive them? Bob bought a $100 suit but couldn't afford any underwear. Says he, if your outside looks real good, no one will know what's under there. Jack bought some $100 shorts, but wore a suit with rips and tears. Says he, it won't matter what people see, as long as I know what's under there. Tom bought a flute and a box of crayons, some bread and cheese, and a golden pear. As for his suit or his underwear, he doesn't think about them much or care. Traveling light means being comfortable in your own skin. It's knowing appearances don't tell the whole story. It means putting your $100 towards things that make you happy, without regard for what others will think. When I was younger, I didn't really care what others thought. I spent my allowance, my $100, on tangerines and paint-by-number books. In my early teens, I cared about what others thought, so I spent my babysitting money on clothes. And now, I feel like I've come a little bit full circle, spending my income on paints and markers and sketch pads. Not all my income, of course, although that would be really fun. But the point is, I've stopped caring about what others think, and I do what makes me happy, even if someone else might find it frivolous. And here's one important consideration to put things in perspective. Since everyone is worried about what everyone else thinks of them, that means no one is considering anyone but themselves. So no one is thinking of you. Think about that. One of the heaviest weights we carry is our worry about what others will think. Even if you're over that, like I mostly am, it still creeps up. We're human. It's simultaneously the simplest and hardest habit to let go. Question: what would be possible for you if you didn't care what others thought? This brings us to hug of war. I will not play at tug of war. I'd rather play at hug-a-war, where everyone hugs instead of tugs, where everyone giggles and rolls on the rug, where everyone kisses and everyone grins. I don't know why this is getting to me. And everyone cuddles and everyone wins. Feels like we're in a world of tug of war right now. And we've forgotten about the hugs. Silverstein has nudged us towards traveling light by polishing our existing stars and releasing our worries about what others think of us. This verse touches on one of the most powerful driving forces in humankind that keeps us from traveling light: fear. Silverstein tells us we have a choice about living love or living fear. I hear hug a war as taking the Beatles' All You Need Is Love from 1967 and telling it slant in 1971. As we try to live love, it's useful to know how we live fear. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, the phrase tug of war originally meant the decisive contest, the real struggle or tussle, a severe contest for supremacy. What are we fighting for? Supremacy. What's underneath that need for supremacy? Fear. As I've mentioned a few times this morning, keeping ourselves safe and trying to control fear is part of why we cling and clutter. In a way, its heaviness keeps us still and numb, which also feels safe. But is that how we want to spend our days? In a tug of war with others to prove we're right, to show we're tough, to show that we're winners? Are we meant to live our lives under a weighted blanket of fear? We know that coming from fear is a waste of time and a losing battle. We know that love wins every single time. To keep this top of mind for myself, I think of a proverb that I heard years ago. It's a version of another quote that is variously attributed, so I can't tell you where it comes from, but it fits really perfectly here. Fear knocked, love answered the door, and no one was there. So question, how much lighter would your travels be if you always answered fear with love? And I didn't think about this until a few minutes ago, but it's kind of it came up in pre-talk about part of letting go and traveling light is about forgiveness. Forgiveness of ourselves, forgiveness of others. And it made me think, and sorry, I'm probably going to cry. It made me think of a story from the last time I visited my mom. And as I shared in a previous talk, my father died on September 20th of last year. And so I've been trying to walk alongside my mom as she, sort of adjusts to this new life without her partner of 54 years. And I hadn't been, I had just arrived, we were sitting at the kitchen table, I hadn't been sitting there but 10 minutes when she looked at me and she said, I've been wanting to talk to you about something and ask you something. She said, I want you to tell me the ways that I hurt you. And I was like, what? What is this? What is going on? I want you to tell me the ways that I have hurt you as, when you were a child or anything. And I almost didn't, I just sat there. I was sort of stunned. And I had to sift through my mind because, of course, a few things pop up immediately, right? Because we all have those things. We've all been hurt by others, including and especially sometimes our parents, even though they love us. And so I had to sort of sift through, okay, what do I say and what do I not say? And as we started doing it, we probably had this conversation for about an hour. And she told me some things that I had said that hurt her. And she told me that she was doing this because, essentially, she wanted to travel lighter. She had been holding on to, wondering what had she done, what hurt had she caused, or hurts that she had suffered. And it was, I still can't believe that she did that. And then the next morning, I pick her up. We're going to go somewhere. And she says, well, now that you've had the night to think about it, did anything else come up about how I've hurt you? And I think I named one or two other things, but I'm like, no, I think I'm good. But but it was just such a beautiful modeling and example of the power of forgiveness, the power of clearing the air, of letting go, of holding on to things that we have resentments about or weighing us down. It was therapeutic for her. It was, incredibly therapeutic for me. So this final poem brings together letting go and traveling light. It opens with the key question we can ask ourselves when life gets overwhelming and we're worried about everything. It closes with a reminder that we have what we need to weather the storm, if only we trust ourselves and the way we are made. So what if it drizzles and dribbles and drips? I'll splash in the garden, I'll dance on the roof. Let it rain on my skin. It can't get in. I'm waterproof. Thank you.